Chapter 18 in the Gamble and Gamble book explains informative public speaking. And it's important now that I just remind you that there's persuasive public speaking and informative public speaking. And I don't want you for the informative speech to give a speech where you're trying to change anybody's behavior. Don't try to advocate any special cause or get us to start some new exercise plan or start eating correctly, because that's more for a persuasive speech to request an action from your audience. For an informative speech, all you're doing is teaching us a lesson. We just want to learn something from you, and it usually should just be 2 to 4 main points that we'll remember at the end of your speech. Your goal is to teach us something that we'll remember. You can select a topic involving an object, an idea, an event, a person. You can give a speech on a process. A how-to speech is a process speech, or how to do a certain procedure. And I want you to make sure, though, that you pursue informative speaking goals. Whether you're a student, an employee, a parent, you're going to be speaking informatively to audiences for the rest of your life. Most often, it'll be in your daily work life where you have either a customer that you're trying to explain the procedures for getting a refund, or maybe the benefits to a certain cell phone plan. If you're selling real estate, you're going to be giving an informative speech on a property. So always remember how important it is that you share a lesson in a concise way that people will remember. You'll describe, demonstrate, or explain something to people every day in informative speaking. You might pick for a topic an object or an idea. When speaking about an object, and it could be a real object or a fake one, you have to describe it and tell its uses. This is a test question. You should use either a topical or physical framework that allows you to discuss major components of the object. And you should go, one component at a time when you're explaining the object. Can somebody give me an example of an object that you might want to give a speech on?
Like the glass one. That's an object that you use.
The uses of a glass, the other uses of a glass. Most of the time I hear speeches having to do with electronics. Students explain electronics, and some of them have even students have even given speeches about how a hard drive operates. It's really a lot to cover in a 5-minute speech, but you have to start grouping the content into 2 to 4 main points. Even if you were to tell us how to change a tire, you have to realize that there's more than 2 to 4 steps, so you have to group it. So the first step would be getting the right equipment, and then maybe the second step would be lining up the jack underneath of the car properly. So you just have to remember how many steps you're going to cover and then restate it to your audience so that we'll remember those steps. And baking a cake, there's so many steps to that, but you have to group the first part into buying the ingredients, the second part into heating the oven up and getting certain things ready so you can start. And you can also organize into stages with a process speech. Actually, I'm covering objects right now. So as far as objects, it tells you in this lesson that you need to come up with a framework where you discuss one component of the object at a time. So if it's a piece of real estate, one component would be you're going to describe one bedroom. Another component would be you're going to describe the living room. Ideas are the same way in concepts. Don't jump around when you're describing a concept and you're talking about one definition, and then you shift and you talk about some updated definition. Paint an accurate and informative, a rich picture of what you are trying to relate to your audience. Come up with some familiar metaphors that we would identify with, some analogies. If you're trying to describe the distance between here and Mexico, you might want to explain to us that you have to go to the Miami airport and the flight takes however many hours. If you're trying to describe the size of a country, we would want to know what, you'd pick a more familiar country. Here's an example. When I wrote my book on the country East Timor, most people didn't know where East Timor is, and maybe you don't know where East Timor is. So what I said is it's a country that's the size of New Jersey. So you get a picture of the geographic area. When you give a speech about an object, which is a thing, you can use spatial organization, and spatial has to do with describing north, central, south, or inside, outside. It could be the top of it, the bottom of it that you're describing. It could be if you're describing the object being a triple layer cake or a wedding cake, you would have to describe each stage of the cake. If you don't want to organize it spatially, chronologically, an object could be described chronologically. So maybe the development of a butterfly from a caterpillar, and the object, transforms. Even the life of a human from infant or from fetus to infant to adulthood. Or you could go with a topical format, and a topical format is the most common when you're describing a topic. So maybe if you're trying to describe an object being your favorite place to visit, like Disney World, the topical format a lot of students use for going to Disney World is covering all of the worlds that they have at Disney World. So what do they have there? Magic Kingdom. Do they still have Fantasyland, Tomorrowland? Is it still organized that way? I haven't been in so long.
It is Tomorrowland.
Tomorrowland.
Space.
That's Tomorrowland, where all the space things are. So anyway, the way that it's organized at Disney World, or it's grouped there by location, so that would be a topical format. Or you could say, I'm going to cover everything to do with price with Disney World. Now I'm going to cover everything involving resorts that are at the amusement park that you could stay at the resorts. So that would be topical format. Costs, hotels to stay at, and rides. That would be topical. When you're speaking about an idea that's a topic, it's really tough to talk about an idea because it could get really abstract. And I've had some very philosophical students that come in here and they get into all this existentialism, and they try to mirror what they've learned in another course. But you have to realize that most of the students in here are not in a philosophy class, so it's going to be really hard to follow. So explain your ideas, make it relevant to students. And maybe there's a celebrity right now who's into, name a very popular religion right now that celebrities are into.
Scientology.
There could be, okay, you're going to give a speech about Scientology. Maybe you would talk about a celebrity that's currently high profile. So these are all the examples that you could pull in that would relate to students. And if there's something going on campus that is a philosophical event, religious event, I group religions, philosophy, and concepts, and psychology. They're all called ideas to me because if we hear a speech about all of those items, even knowledge could be an idea. If you were it's usually too broad to cover psychology, but if you were to try to narrow it down to child psychology and then even narrow it even more to one type of diagnosis involving child development psychology, and maybe even further down where it could be treatments for one type of a disease. You can have a health topic also for this speech. It really wouldn't be an idea speech, but health, that would probably fall under, health might fall under process. Think about that one. Yeah, it would depend on if your health has to do with one critical incident of an emergency. That would be an event. So anyway, we're moving on. Events and people. If you're going to pick a topic about events and people, your classmates might be thrilled with your knowledge of history. You want to make sure it's chronological, and you don't want to jump around if you're telling us about an event. If you were to tell us about Mardi Gras, we realize that Mardi Gras is over certain days of the week, it would not make sense for you to talk about the ending of Mardi Gras, then jump to the first day of it. You go from Fat Tuesday back, and there's a lot of parades that happen on certain days with Mardi Gras, so you need to go chronologically. And usually you go from farthest in the past to the present, and maybe even to the future if you're covering an event. So here's what an event speech would cover, something that happens regularly. It could be a holiday or a birthday. In this class, we've actually had other speeches that were very oriented towards events. It could be something that happened once, something that marked our life, something that had a lasting impression. Natural disasters. I've heard so many 9/11 speeches, and you're pretty young in this room, so maybe you didn't actually watch it on television like I did or your parents did. The narrative for that changes with the young people, because if I were to say to a lot of you, what was the nationality of the people who committed 9/11? Does anybody know here? Do any of you know? Saudi. Yeah. So that's something that in the narrative, they just keep calling them terrorists. So, I always say, make sure you got your content, make sure you find your sources and you're accurate with things. Your goal is to bring the event to life so your audience can visualize and experience it. Transport the people in this room to the location. If it's an event, make us feel like we're there as you give us examples and you describe vividly the taste, the smell, the sights, what we can hear. You also have a PowerPoint, so with the PowerPoint presentation, you can show images that relate to the people in this room. Looking around, I wouldn't expect your images in your PowerPoint to have any senior citizen photographs in it, because that does not relate to the people in this room. So pick images that relate to the people in this room. Speaking about people, if you're going to give a speech about a person, it could be your favorite athlete, a rock star, somebody famous, someone living, dead. Your goal is to make their qualities and share whatever impact they've had in society relevant to the people in this room. You want to answer, was this person worthy of our attention? If you picked your favorite athlete, a lot of students cover their professional life, what they're paid, and then maybe their family life. And then it even gets a little bit chronological when you're covering an athlete, maybe how they change teams or how they develop their careers. And you can mix it a little bit with chronological order, but then also the qualities that make them a successful athlete. All right, so the chronological pattern we've learned in here from other chapters, and it's a sequence. You want to make sure that you cover, and this is on the test, an event or a person's life. You want to have a chronological pattern and explain the history. You may also have a topical pattern, and a topical pattern allows you to divide your subject into groups or major categories. A topical pattern allows you to divide your subject into groups or major categories. A speech where you enumerate and discuss aspects of the idea would be the topical order. So if you're going to cover an idea with a topical pattern, you're going to give a speech about an idea, that would probably be topical, and you'd have to just cover 3 aspects of that concept. So if it's underwater basket weaving as a concept, actually that's a process. If you're going to cover Buddhism, all right, so then you have to organize the aspects into topical order and enumerate segments of that concept, if that makes sense. My favorite type of speech is the process speech or procedures. The textbook gives us an example, I think this was in the textbook, of how a tornado develops. That would be one process of telling how a tornado develops. And that would be chronological usually because you would talk about it in stages. Stage 1 is the origin, and then go into stage 2, whatever that's called, or the phases. You could discuss a process in phases, and I expect you to use the signpost in your speech too. During the body of the speech, you would say the first stage, and you can use that illustrator. The first stage is, and you talk about it. Now that I've covered the first stage, I'm now going to tell you all about the second stage. You talk about it. You definitely don't want to have more than 5 stages because you would lose us. And in your preview, you can tell us, I'm going to tell you the 4 stages of how tornadoes develop. All right, so you go into your body and you're talking about all the stages, and you finish with the 4th stage of tornado development, and you're now shifting to your conclusion. So you would say to everybody, in conclusion, I have now told you the 4 stages of how a tornado develops. We definitely worry about people who don't know the stages because you could be out there with your kids on the ball field and you see that cluster of clouds forming and you see the, what is it called? You're probably learning weather as a aviation major. What is it called when a tornado starts to develop? A funnel cloud? So anyway, in your conclusion, you would somehow make it creative and tie back into your introduction, whatever your attention getter was, whatever you mentioned in your intro. It could be you started out with a narrative about how we could be out here at Broward College on the field. Think of some local examples that we can relate to. You could say, you were down in South Beach and you were having a great time and all of a sudden you looked up. And so this would be your intro, and then you make your speech about the phases of tornado development. I've had some great speeches on how to wash your hands properly. I watched a student, she came in and she teaches kindergarten kids, and she told us in her intro why she picked her topic is that she teaches kindergarten kids how to wash their hands effectively. So she had a bowl, and then she had somebody helping her with a pitcher, pouring water on her hands, and her tip to the audience was to sing happy birthday to me, happy birthday to me. So they teach children that you need to sing the whole birthday song as you lather your hands, and she also told us about the proper soap to use and some other tips. And then she finished, and that was her informative speech. Pick a speech that's easy for you to give. Don't do a lot of research. I don't want you to learn something new for this speech. Pick something you're already comfortable with, and of course you still have to do some research and have it in your bibliography and say the sources out loud. Don't come into, those of you that are online, it's a different situation. Those of you that are in this classroom though right now, don't bring in a live baby and teach us how to change a diaper. I've had that. It's a disaster to have a baby in the classroom and have us watch you change their diaper. It's okay to bring a doll and do it, but don't bring a live baby. Also, don't bring your animals in and show us how the dog does tricks. If you want to show in your PowerPoint photographs of the dog doing those tricks, that would be great. Don't teach us anything illegal. Rolling a joint is not something that I could get in trouble by allowing you to teach the class how to do that. And maybe most of you already know how, and it wouldn't be anything new. So I encourage you, though, to come in here and come up with some creative topics. I've seen how to put on a condom properly, and they showed us on a penis that was fake. So, come in here and dazzle us with this new tip that you've learned how to do a how-to speech. So questions that you asked. This is really basic, and this author really could have came up with some better. When we answer such questions, we share our understanding with the class. It's to help your audience understand your topic. You're going to learn new skills from the process. Speech can teach you new skills. You'll all end up learning how to bake cookies. If you bring food in, something that you're teaching us how to bake a cake or how to make a sandwich, pre-cut things, just like the TV programs where they're on a 30-second segment, have the finished product. I've had students waste too much time cutting the ingredients, have it cut up already, and then pull out of your magic oven the finished product. And if you want to share with everybody samples or whatever, that's okay. We just have to make sure the room's cleaned up. Processes, like we said, chronological order. You're probably saying, well, why chronological? I wouldn't talk about the 1900s version of how to bake cookies. No, it's stages. That's a process. You go stages or steps. Another way of chronological, of course, is by dates. Topical pattern is where you pick certain aspects of something and you cover 2 to 4 things about that method. If you have too many main points, have some logical categorization and group them together and say, there's a couple things you need to do in the first stage of changing a tire. The couple of things is buy the right equipment to carry in your car. About the only thing in this slide that I like, and these slides were produced by the publisher, provide a fresh way of looking at something. If you're going to give a speech about how to make a food, maybe tell us what you're doing differently. Is it you're having a low-fat recipe? Is it your mother's favorite recipe? And maybe throw in some anecdotes about mom. And there is a way that you need to cite, if it's your mother's recipe, you need to cite that in the bibliography as an interview. And if it's a friend or a relative and you didn't find it in a textbook, magazine, book, you still need to cite it as an interview, and we're going to learn how to do that in here. You want to be memorable. You want us to remember. We want to be able to test the audience after you give your speech and say, what was the 3 steps to, what's a good speech topic? Teaching your dog a new trick. But you have to be more specific about which trick you're going to teach them. The textbook talks a lot about jargon, so make sure that you read that because there's questions on the test where you have to identify what jargon is. And I mentioned it before that highly technical language exists in the medical field called jargon, medical jargon, and there's also legal jargon. And if you start using too much jargon that we can't understand, maybe you work in a medical office and you know it, but for an audience that's mixed like this, try to explain those terms in layperson's terms that we can all understand. When it says use concrete language, I've always discouraged you from saying the word stuff. Stuff is not concrete. Be precise, or don't say thing. And a lot of people, they give a speech and they start listing and they say the next thing you need to do, and the next, and the next, and the next thing. Don't say thing, say step, or the next procedure, or the next item that I want to show to you. Try to get rid of those vague words, but be accurate with your words. You'll learn that when you work in, say, law enforcement or you're a lawyer, people pick apart words. So if you use the wrong term, you'll be embarrassed either in a deposition, in trial. If police officers write the wrong statement in their affidavits, lawyers will pick it apart and say, well, you said this in the police report and it wasn't even accurate. You said that you saw a dog. What type of dog? You should be more, what breed of dog was it? Or they put the specific breed and it was wrong. So the credibility hurts. Language use is important. So if I were to tell you that I have a dog, you would probably wonder, you're visualizing all different things, right? You don't know if it's a young dog, old dog, what breed it is. But then if I were to say to you, I have a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, and then you would say, wow, what type of dog is that? And you start to visualize what that is. And then I would say it's a female Staffordshire Bull Terrier. And then you're getting to know a little bit more. But what if I have 2 dogs? That could be confusing. You didn't realize I was describing only one and I really have 2. So we have to be specific and say, I only have 1 dog and it's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. And if I was having a conversation with someone who knows me and I had 2 dogs, they would say, I'm confused. Which dog are you talking about? Then you have to say the dog's name. My dog's name is Prada. So then they would know specifically her name. Her name is Prada. She's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, and you could visualize it. So being specific can really help you as you speak publicly and conversationally. Convey the right amount of information. Don't overwhelm us with too many main points. You need to really practice your timing and keep it to 2 to 4 main points. Don't race is what the author of the textbook says. Pace, in this case, is not pace back and forth to the audience. Pace is have your vocal pace where we can follow you. Don't assume that we know everything about your topic, so dumb it down for everybody step by step. Tell us. You're probably saying, wow, I'm giving a how-to speech. They already know how to open up a can. They already know how to open up whatever it is. No, explain to us the best way to, should we open up the cans at the very beginning? Is that a step to save time? Do you preheat the oven? People are probably wondering, what type of oven? Convection oven? There's different types, so you have to really pick your words carefully. Repeat and don't retreat. Repeat steps for us so we can remember. So if you're halfway through, it's good to use one of those summaries and say, I just went through 3 steps and I'm going to cover 2 more. Is everybody following along? It's okay to say that to your audience. Is everybody following along? You'll get brownie points from me. I'll say, wow, excellent, 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 that you stopped for a minute to make sure everybody was following. A lot of times I lose students and they start to fall asleep. And I stop what I'm doing and I go, are you okay? Is that person okay over there? Because I really pay attention while I'm speaking. Sustain their attention. So in the attention getter, you're going to grab everybody's attention. Even in an informative speech, you were so good at doing it and the others doing it. See, I'm being vague here. You were so good at an attention getter in your personal experience speech. Those attention getters were great. You also need one for the informative speech. I hate to hear at the beginning of a speech, my topic is on. Well, I don't even need to hear it because you just told me the topic. So just go ahead and just begin with, a lot of you probably already know how to make widgets, but you've never heard of the best way to make widgets. And I want to share that with all of you today, the best, most efficient way to make widgets. Let me begin now. So that's a way to capture our attention. And adapt to your audience. If they look lost, slow down. The test tells you to learn the ways to be memorable. Learn the ways to be memorable. Let them know what you think is important for them to retain. Just like this lecture I'm giving you, I'm telling you, when you hear me repeat something twice, it's important for you to know. If I say this is on the test, it's important for you to know. Stress the points with verbal and nonverbal means using repetition, pauses, vocal emphasis, and gestures. Rephrasing an idea in different words is referred to in the book, and it's good to do. Rephrasing an idea in different words. It's important to do. You can build in audience participation, but I really don't want you to have a dialogue with your audience while you're presenting, because it cuts into your time when somebody in the audience wants to take over your speech and keep going back and forth with you. But it's certainly okay to say, could I see a show of hands? How many of you have had this happen where, let me try to think of a cooking goof up that I've done. Probably just burning things. So anyway, you would probably say to your audience, have any of you ever burned something before? And that could be in the middle of the speech, not just as an attention getter. Little anecdotes like that. I watched a speech before I came to class because I watch online speeches, and one of the students said that their mother, they were given a speech on themselves, and they said that their grandmother told them that they're a very good cook, and the grandmother was giving them examples of the dishes that they made. And I thought that was just really good anecdotes that gets me to know the person better, that they have a good relationship with their grandparents and try to cook the family recipes. In conclusion, people are most interested in people. People are most interested in people. So you can give us all the facts and figures and statistics and step by step, but when you throw in little anecdotes like I just mentioned about a grandmother, or you could talk about your husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, while you're demonstrating, you can throw in little anecdotes that'll make us laugh. You could even tell us about something funny that happened when you were doing this process, when you were first learning the process, some goof ups that you made. Human interest is really important to put into this, otherwise it's a very dry speech. So just to recap, speeches can be about objects, ideas, events, people, processes, procedures, and I'm hoping that you'll achieve your informative speaking goals for the next speech.